There's a moment just before your world falls apart when everything feels off but not enough to make you run. Like a glass teetering on the edge of a table, you see it wobbling, sense that something is wrong, but you don't reach for it. Not yet. You tell yourself it won't fall. You tell yourself it's nothing. That was me 3 months ago. I was standing in the middle of a high-end boutique, my hands wrapped around an overpriced perfume bottle, debating whether or not I should get it for my wife, Madison. She loved these designer brands, the kind that had ridiculous French names and smelled like wealth itself. I wanted to surprise her. That's when I saw him. He was tall, built like someone who had never worked a day in his life but spent hours at the gym compensating for it. His suit was expensive, custom-tailored, the kind of thing men like me couldn't justify spending money on. But it wasn't his appearance that caught my attention. It was the way he spoke. Loud, careless. The kind of arrogance that comes from never facing consequences. I wasn't eavesdropping at first, but then I heard my wife's name. I don't know why she's still pretending with that guy. The man laughed, shaking his head. She's got the company, the money, the best of both worlds. If I were her, I would have dropped him months ago. I felt my stomach tighten. The glass teetered. The man's friend, some guy with a Rolex that probably cost more than my car, chuckled. She's smart. As long as he's in the picture, she can play innocent. No one questions the devoted wife, right? My grip on the perfume bottle tightened. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips, a deep, slow thudding that echoed in my skull. I should have walked away. I should have ignored it. Instead, I turned. Who are you talking about? I asked, my voice calm. Too calm. The man, her lover, I realized as he looked at me, paused for just a second before grinning. Just business talk, man. Don't worry about it. I didn't blink. Madison. That's my wife's name. That was when I saw it, the flicker of recognition, the way his smirk twitched for just a fraction of a second. And then, just as quickly, he laughed again, shaking his head. Small world. He was good. Too good. But not perfect. I left without the perfume. That was the first crack. The first sign that the glass wasn't just wobbling. It was about to shatter. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the slow, steady breathing of the woman beside me. Madison. My wife. My business partner. My betrayer? The conversation from earlier played in my head on an endless loop. The way that man had spoken, the arrogance in his voice. She's got the company, the money, the best of both worlds. He had been talking about my wife. That much was clear. But was it just empty talk? Was I about to destroy my marriage over some stranger's drunken conversation? I told myself I needed proof. Real proof. Because right now I had nothing. At 4 a.m. I made my decision. I got out of bed as quietly as I could and walked to Madison's office. It was separate from mine, on the other side of the house. She claimed she needed her own space to work, to think, to plan for the future of the company. I never questioned it. I should have. The door was locked. That alone was strange. She never locked her office. I went back to her bedroom, my heart hammering, and carefully checked her nightstand. Her phone was there, face down, like always. Madison never let me go near it. She had 1,000 excuses. It's for work, she'd say. You wouldn't understand half the stuff on it. My fingers hovered over it. If I picked it up and she woke up? No. I couldn't risk it. Not yet. Instead, I grabbed my laptop and did something I should have done months ago. I accessed our business accounts. I wasn't expecting to find much, just routine transactions, payroll, expenses. But within minutes, my blood ran cold. There were withdrawals. Large ones. Disguised as vendor payments, marketing expenses, consultant fees. Money that should have been accounted for, but wasn't. And the name attached to most of these payments? Logan Carter. I didn't recognize the name at first, but after a quick search, my stomach flipped. Logan Carter. The man from the boutique. The glass didn't just wobble this time. It cracked. I heard Madison stir in the bedroom, shifting under the covers. I closed the laptop and forced myself to breathe. This wasn't enough. Not yet. I needed more. And I was going to get it. The next morning, I played my role. I smiled, kissed Madison's cheek, and asked her about her plans for the day. She stretched, looking effortlessly perfect, like she hadn't just spent the night sleeping next to the man. She was bleeding dry. Meetings, the usual, she said casually, stealing a sip of my coffee like she always did. Might be home late. We have a huge campaign launching soon, and I need to make sure everything's running smoothly. I nodded like I believed her. Like I hadn't spent the last few hours uncovering evidence that my wife was funneling money into an account connected to another man. I needed more, and I knew exactly where to get it. Once she left, I grabbed my laptop and went deeper. Emails, transactions, internal company reports. Madison always assumed I stayed out of the day-to-day finances, letting her handle the operations while I took care of the legal and strategic side of the business. She probably thought I was too busy to notice the numbers shifting under my nose. But I noticed now. The payments to Logan Carter had been coming in for months. Some were listed as marketing consulting, others as vendor partnerships, but they were all lies. Fake invoices, false paperwork. I traced one of the transactions to a high-end penthouse in the city, one I had never heard Madison mention before. That was my next stop. The penthouse I parked 2 blocks away. My hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles ached. I told myself to calm down, to approach this like a business deal. Rational. Strategic. But the moment I saw her car parked in the building's private lot, every rational thought in my head burned away. I forced myself inside, pretending to belong. Madison always underestimated me, always assumed I wouldn't dig, wouldn't fight. She was wrong. The penthouse was on the 32nd floor. The elevator ride felt like it lasted an eternity. I knocked once. No answer. Twice. Nothing. Then I tried the handle. Unlocked. The moment I stepped inside, I knew I wasn't supposed to be here. The place smelled expensive. Leather, cologne, and something faintly familiar. I walked through the open-concept living room, my heart hammering against my ribs. And then I saw it. A half-empty bottle of Madison's favorite wine on the counter. 2 glasses, lipstick stained. Her coat draped over a chair, and a framed photo on the coffee table. Of Madison and Logan Carter. At some exclusive resort, clinking glasses like a couple celebrating their success. The air left my lungs. She wasn't just cheating on me. She was celebrating it. I stood there, staring at the proof, feeling something deep inside me snap. Then I heard the door behind me click open. I turned slowly. Logan Carter stood in the doorway, expensive sunglasses pushed up into his perfect hair, a designer duffel bag slung over his shoulder. He looked like he had just stepped off a yacht, polished, effortless, disgustingly comfortable. But the moment he saw me, his whole body stiffened. He wasn't expecting this. Neither of us spoke right away. We just stared at each other, the weight of what was about to happen pressing down on the space between us. Then he smirked. That same arrogant smirk he had at the boutique. The one that said I've already won. Well, he said, tossing his bag onto the couch like he owned the place. This is awkward. I didn't move. I didn't blink. My hands were steady, my breathing even. But inside, I was a hurricane. Go ahead, he said, loosening the buttons on his cuff like we were just 2 guys talking business. Say what you came to say. I stepped forward, slow, deliberate. My eyes flicked to the wine glasses, the coat, the picture. Proof. How long? I asked, my voice eerily calm. Logan chuckled. Ah, the classic question. He tilted his head, pretending to think. What answer would make you feel better? 3 months? 6? A year? I didn't react. That seemed to bother him. He sighed, rolling his shoulders like this whole thing was an inconvenience. All right, fine. Since you went through all this trouble to find out, he took a seat on the couch, stretching out like he belonged there. Madison and I? We've been working together since last summer. The casual way he said it sent heat rushing through my veins. And by working together you mean... Oh, you know exactly what I mean. He grinned. But hey, look at the bright side. She's doing great. The business is thriving. And he gestured around. This place isn't cheap. I'd say your investments paid off. He was mocking me. I let the words sink in. Let the rage coil inside me like a spring. But I didn't lash out. Not yet. Because I wasn't just here for answers. I was here for something bigger. You really think she's going to stick around for you? I asked. Logan raised an eyebrow. Excuse me? I gestured toward the photo of them on the table. You're just a stepping stone. A good time. The fun part before she moves on to the next best thing. Logan laughed, shaking his head. You don't know her like I do. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. I know her better. For the first time, the confidence in his eyes flickered. Just a little. He wasn't sure anymore. Good. I let that seed of doubt sink in before turning on my heel and heading for the door. Because I wasn't done. Not even close. I didn't go home. I couldn't. Not yet. Instead, I drove. Nowhere in particular, just out of the city, past the quiet neighborhoods where families sat down for dinner, past the gas stations with flickering neon signs. My hands gripped the wheel, my mind racing through every possible move I could make. Madison thought she had one. Logan thought he had one. They had no idea what was coming. By the time I pulled into an empty parking lot near the water, my mind was clear. The next steps had started forming in my head like puzzle pieces sliding into place. I didn't just want to leave her. That would be too easy. Too merciful. No. I wanted something better. I wanted revenge. And I knew exactly where to start. The next morning, I walked into our company's headquarters like nothing was wrong. I nodded at the receptionist, exchanged pleasantries with the employees, and made my way to my office. Our office. The empire I built with my own hands. The empire she was trying to steal. I spent hours going through financial records, legal documents, contracts, everything. Every questionable transaction, every hidden account. Madison had been careful but not careful enough. There were too many missing links, too many inconsistencies that, with the right push, would crumble under scrutiny. She had underestimated me. By noon, I had everything I needed. Copies of payments, emails between her and Logan, proof that company funds were being siphoned off for personal use. I even found messages between them discussing how to cut me out completely, how to frame me as the problem, the weak link holding her company back. I sat back in my chair, exhaling slowly. They had planned everything, but they didn't realize they were standing on a trapdoor, and I was about to pull the lever. That evening, I went home early. Madison wasn't expecting me. She was in the kitchen, sipping a glass of wine, scrolling through her phone like she didn't have a care in the world. She looked up, surprised. You're home early. I smiled. Thought we could have dinner together. Her eyes flickered with something, hesitation? Guilt? I couldn't tell. But she covered it quickly, pushing away from the counter. Sounds great. I'll change into something more comfortable. She walked past me, leaving her phone on the counter. Unlocked. It took less than a minute to find exactly what I was looking for. Messages. Plans. A meeting scheduled with Logan for tomorrow at an upscale restaurant. Perfect. I locked the screen and placed the phone back, then grabbed a bottle of wine and poured myself a glass. Tomorrow, everything would change. I barely slept that night. My mind was too sharp, too focused, running through every possible outcome of what I was about to do. There was no hesitation, no second guessing. I had given Madison every chance in the world to be the person she pretended to be. But she had made her choice. Now it was my turn. By morning, I was already dressed in my best suit, sitting in my car outside the restaurant she had chosen for her little meeting with Logan. It wasn't just any place. It was one of those high-profile reservations, only spots where people with money made their dirty deals over overpriced cocktails. I knew her routine. Madison never arrived first. She always made an entrance, let others wait for her. It was a power move, something she had picked up from years of playing people like pieces on a chessboard. So when Logan walked through the glass doors, I gave it exactly 10 minutes before following him inside. The hostess smiled at me. Good morning, sir. Do you have a reservation? I smiled back. I'm meeting someone. Her eyes flickered with brief hesitation, but I was already scanning the restaurant. And then there, a secluded booth near the back. Logan was sipping an espresso, scrolling on his phone, completely unaware of the storm about to hit him. I didn't sit. I just walked up, leaned slightly over the table, and placed a single printed document in front of him. He looked up, confused. Then his gaze dropped to the paper. And just like that, the smirk was gone. It was a copy of the company's financial records, specifically the ones that traced the stolen funds straight to his name. His jaw tensed. What the hell is this? I slid into the seat across from him, calm, controlled. That's what you're going to explain when the IRS comes knocking. Unless you'd rather I go straight to the authorities first. For the first time, Logan looked truly shaken. He flipped through the pages, his movements sharp, panicked. He was trying to find a hole, some way to dismiss it, but there wasn't one. You have no idea what you're messing with, he said finally, voice low. I leaned back. Oh, I know exactly what I'm messing with. I built this company from nothing. I know every number, every contract, every hidden expense. You? You're just another leech. His fingers tightened around the paper. You think Madison is going to let this happen? You think she's going to take your side? I smiled. She won't have a choice. And as if on cue, Madison walked in. She was stunning, as always, red dress, perfect hair, exuding power and confidence. She spotted Logan first, but before she could flash him that everything's under control smile, her gaze landed on me. She froze. And in that split second, I saw it, the realization. The fear. She knew. I gestured toward the seat next to Logan. Sit. She didn't move. So I leaned forward, locking eyes with her. Or should I do this in front of the whole restaurant? Her jaw tightened, but she didn't argue. She slid into the seat, crossing her arms like she was still in control. Like she still had a card to play. I placed another document on the table. This one was more personal: emails, texts, proof of their affair. Her eyes flickered over the words. She stayed composed, but I saw the slight tremor in her fingers as she pushed the paper aside. This is pathetic, she muttered. No, I said calmly. This is justice. I let them sit in silence, let the weight of it all sink in. Then I leaned in just enough for them to feel it. I own everything. The company, the assets, the legal rights. And after today, you two won't own anything. Madison's mask cracked just slightly. Logan's hand curled into a fist on the table. I smiled. This was only the beginning. For a long, stretched moment, neither of them spoke. Madison's fingers remained tight around the edge of the table, her nails digging into the polished wood. Logan, for all his arrogance, wasn't smirking anymore. His jaw clenched, and I could almost hear the gears turning in his head, scrambling for a way out. I let them sit in the weight of it. Let them feel what it was like to lose. Then Madison exhaled sharply through her nose and straightened her posture, tilting her chin up like she still had control. You think you're some mastermind, don't you? She said, her voice smooth, almost amused. That you're going to scare me with some spreadsheets and bank statements? She was trying to bait me, trying to get me to react. But I didn't. I simply leaned back in my chair and slid the final piece of paperwork onto the table. The one that mattered the most. The contract. The legally binding document that handed full ownership of the company over to me. Madison blinked. Just once. But it was enough. I had spent years letting her believe she was the one pulling the strings. That she had me wrapped around her finger, that I was just the supportive husband funding her dreams. But I wasn't stupid. I had structured the business in a way that protected me. Every major asset, every significant financial decision, I had the final say. Her lips parted slightly, just enough for me to catch the way she inhaled. This is fake, she said. But her voice lacked the certainty it usually held. I smiled. It's not. And before you start thinking you can fight this, don't bother. The legal team has already reviewed everything. You signed the paperwork yourself, sweetheart. Her eyes flicked over the pages, scanning frantically, looking for a loophole. But there wasn't one. Logan shifted uncomfortably in his seat. You're bluffing, he muttered. No way, she wouldn't have seen this coming. I turned to him, my expression calm. You don't know Madison as well as you think you do. Then I looked back at her. You were too busy playing the role of the brilliant businesswoman to realize you were just a face on the cover. The decisions, the power, that was always me. Her jaw tightened, her fingers pressing harder into the table. I could feel the fury radiating off her, but she still wasn't breaking. Not yet. So I twisted the knife. Oh, and since I own the company, I added, casually flipping to another page. That means I also control your salary. Which, by the way, is about to be nothing. Logan made a noise, something between a laugh and disbelief. You're cutting her off? I turned my gaze to him. And you. Now he froze. Because the financials weren't just about Madison. Logan had been draining money too. All those fake contracts, all those consulting fees, it was all company funds. And now, that well had dried up. I could see it happening in real time, the realization. Madison was still trying to process the fact that she wasn't just losing me. She was losing everything. The power, the money, the security. And Logan? He wasn't getting his payout. For the first time, he turned to her, eyes narrowing. "You told me we were in control," he muttered. Madison stayed silent. His fingers curled into a fist. "You said we were splitting the profits." I raised an eyebrow. "Splitting the profits?" I repeated, feigning curiosity. "That's interesting, because according to these records, Madison was keeping quite a bit more for herself." Logan's head snapped toward me. "What?" I just smiled and pushed another document toward him. One with payments she had been moving into an account he didn't have access to. His eyes darted across the numbers, his face darkening with every line he read. Then he laughed. Short, sharp, bitter. "Unbelievable." Madison remained still. She knew. She knew she had been caught. Not just by me, but by him too. She had been playing both of us, making Logan think he was her equal when, in reality, he was just another pawn. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. "So," I said, letting my voice drop just slightly, enough to make them lean in. "What do you think happens next?" Silence. Then Madison did something incredible. She smiled. Not a soft smile. Not a guilty one. A slow, sharp, calculated smile. And when she spoke, her voice was like silk wrapped around a dagger. "You think this is over?" she said softly. I met her gaze. "I don't think it is." I pushed my chair back, standing. "I know it is." I grabbed my jacket, smoothing the fabric, and looked down at them one last time. "Enjoy the rest of your lunch," I said. "It might be the last expensive meal you'll have for a while." And with that, I walked out. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The moment I stepped out of the restaurant, the weight of it all hit me, not as regret, not as hesitation, but as a reckoning. Years of sacrifice, of building a life with someone I thought I knew, all burned away in a matter of minutes. And the best part? I wasn't even finished yet. Madison thought she could outplay me. Even after being backed into a corner, she still smiled, still acted like she had a card left to play. That was the problem with people like her. They never believed the game could end. But it had. And I was about to make sure she felt it. By the time I got back to the office, my next move was already in motion. I had been planning it for weeks, ever since that moment in the boutique when I first heard Logan running his mouth. That was when I knew something was wrong. That was when I started digging. And that was when I found the leak. See, Madison wasn't just funneling money for her personal use. She had been careless, sloppy. Some of the transactions were disguised as marketing expenses, but they weren't just going to Logan. There were other accounts, smaller ones, scattered through shell companies. At first, I thought she was just hoarding money, keeping it away from me in case she ever decided to cut me loose. But then I found him. Aidan Greer. A competitor. A shark in the industry. And the man who, according to the financial records I now had been benefiting from my company's leaked contracts and insider information. Madison hadn't just been stealing. She had been selling, handing over privileged business information in exchange for personal security. She wasn't just planning to cut me out. She was trying to destroy me. I walked into my office and dialed the number I had been saving for this exact moment. It rang twice before a voice picked up. "This is William Carrington." William was my lawyer, the best money could buy. And he was already waiting for this call. "It's time," I said simply. No hesitation. No second chances. By the end of the day, the lawsuits would be filed. Corporate fraud. Breach of fiduciary duty. Embezzlement. Insider trading. One by one, the walls would start closing in on her. And this wasn't just about money. This was prison-level crime. But I wasn't done. Not yet. An hour later, I sent out a company-wide email. Subject: Leadership announcement effective immediately. Madison Carter is no longer affiliated with this company in any capacity. Any business conducted with her will not be recognized or honored under our corporate policies. Further updates to follow. I didn't need to explain. By the time that email hit inboxes, people were already talking. The whispers had been there for months. The inconsistencies, the quiet disappearances of funds. Employees weren't stupid. They just needed confirmation, and I had just given it to them. Within minutes, my assistant, Rachel, knocked on my door. She stepped inside cautiously, holding her phone. "Sir," she said carefully, "Madison is trying to access the company accounts." I didn't even look up. "Deny it." A pause. "She's calling the CFO. Tell him to ignore it." Another pause. She's in the lobby." I finally glanced up. Couldn't help it. I smiled. "Let her in." Rachel hesitated, then nodded, stepping back out. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. 5 minutes later, my office door burst open, and there she was, Madison, furious, cornered, and about to learn exactly what it felt like to lose everything. Madison stormed into my office like a hurricane, her heels clicking against the floor with sharp, angry precision. She didn't bother with pleasantries, didn't take a second to compose herself. She was past that now, past manipulation, past charm. This wasn't the poised, controlled woman I had once known. This was a woman desperate to keep her world from collapsing. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" she snapped, slamming her hands onto my desk. I didn't flinch. Didn't even blink. "Taking out the trash," I said smoothly, leaning back in my chair. "You should be familiar with the process. You've been doing it to me for months." Her nostrils flared, but I saw it in her eyes, fear. "This isn't over," she spat. I tilted my head slightly. "It really is, though." She let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "You think you can just erase me? That you can pull some power move and walk away unscathed?" I gestured to the chair across from me. "Have a seat, Madison." "I'd rather." I cut her off with a single quiet word. "Sit." She hesitated, just for a second. Then, with a huff, she yanked the chair back and sat down, crossing her arms like a petulant child. I folded my hands on the desk and looked at her. Really looked at her. She was still beautiful. Still had that effortless magazine cover kind of allure that made people bend to her will. But right now, she was just a woman who had been caught playing a game she didn't fully understand. "You never really saw me, did you?" I said, almost conversationally. Her jaw tensed. "What are you talking about?" I gestured around the office. "You thought you could steal from this company, the one I built, the one I own, and that I'd just let you?" I shook my head. "You spent so much time underestimating me that you never stopped to consider what would happen if I turned against you." Madison exhaled through her nose, composing herself. "You don't have the authority to remove me from the company." I slid a folder toward her. "You signed it away. Months ago." She hesitated before flipping it open. The moment her eyes landed on the paperwork, her face paled. "I had you sign this when we restructured the board," I continued. "You were too busy playing the role of the brilliant CEO to actually read what you were putting your name on. And now?" I sat back, watching her absorb the full weight of her mistake. "You're nothing. No shares. No control. Just a name that will be scrubbed from this company by the end of the day." Her fingers tightened around the paper. Then she did what she always did. She tried to pivot. "We built this together," she said, her voice softer now, carefully controlled. "You and me. This company, it's our legacy. Are you really willing to throw everything away over one mistake?" "One mistake," I repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Madison, you embezzled. You leaked corporate information to a competitor. You plan to take me down, to cut me out of my own company, and you have the audacity to sit here and act like this is some minor lapse in judgment." She pressed her lips together, but I wasn't done. "Oh, and let's not forget Logan." I smirked. "He's having a great day, by the way." Her face twitched. "Yeah, he found out about the offshore account," I continued. "The one you set up to keep your share of the money separate from his." I leaned forward slightly. He didn't take it well. She tried to keep her expression neutral, but I saw it, the flicker of panic. "You always thought you were the smartest person in the room," I said. "But you forgot one very important rule." I paused, watching her squirm. "Never bet against the man who built the house." Silence. Madison was breathing heavier now, her hands gripping the chair so tightly her knuckles turned white. "Now," I said, standing up and adjusting my cuffs. Security is on their way to escort you out. And before you try to fight this in court, I'd think twice. She lifted her chin. You have nothing on me. I smiled. Oh, but I do. I gestured to the folder. This is just the beginning. The lawsuits are already being filed. And given the evidence I've gathered, you won't just lose your money. You'll lose your freedom. The color drained from her face. Checkmate. There was a knock at the door. Rachel stepped in, her expression unreadable. Security's here. Madison swallowed hard. Then, slowly, she rose to her feet. She didn't speak, didn't argue. She simply turned and walked toward the door, her posture stiff, her shoulders squared. But right before she stepped out, she hesitated. And then, without looking back, she said the last words she would ever say to me. You'll regret this. I chuckled under my breath. No, Madison, I murmured as the doors shut behind her. I really won't. The moment Madison was escorted out of the building, I stood by the window and watched. She didn't fight, didn't scream. That wasn't her style. Even in complete defeat, she held on to the illusion of control, walking with her head high, her posture perfect, like she was choosing to leave, like this wasn't the worst moment of her life. But I knew better. She was ruined. The second those glass doors shut behind her, she had nothing. No company, no influence, no endless supply of wealth siphoned from the business I built. The penthouse? Gone. The bank accounts? Frozen. And Logan? He had already cut her off the moment he realized she had been playing him, too. She had spent so long carefully constructing a world where she was untouchable. And now, she was just another name on a lawsuit. I turned away from the window and sat back in my chair, exhaling slowly. It was over. I had won. For weeks, I watched as the fallout spread like wildfire. First came the legal filings. I had enough proof to bury her in lawsuits for years. The charges weren't just civil, some were criminal. The moment the authorities started digging, they found more than even I had anticipated. Fake accounts, wire fraud, corporate espionage. The company moved on without her. Clients stayed. Employees stayed. Because at the end of the day, they knew the truth. Madison Carter was just a face. I was the business. She tried to fight. Of course she did. She called in favors, tried to get high-profile lawyers to take her case. But no one wanted to touch it. No one wanted to back a sinking ship. Then came the financial destruction. Her assets were seized. Her credit tanked. The lavish lifestyle she had so carefully curated collapsed under its own weight. She tried to sell whatever she could, but it was too late. She was drowning in legal fees, in lawsuits, in debts she never thought she'd have to pay. And the best part? I never had to lift a finger. She had done this to herself. 3 months after that final meeting in my office, I ran into Logan. It wasn't planned. Just one of those moments life hands you as a gift. I was at a lounge downtown meeting with a business partner when I saw him at the bar. He looked different. Not as polished, not as arrogant. The tailored suits were gone, replaced by something more desperate, a man who had gotten too close to the fire and barely crawled away with his skin intact. I debated ignoring him. But then he looked up. And he saw me. For a second, neither of us moved. Then, slowly, I walked over. He stiffened but didn't look away. Didn't expect to see you here. I smirked. Didn't expect to see you at all. His jaw tightened. He exhaled sharply, then ran a hand down his face. I lost everything, he muttered. I pulled out a chair and sat down across from him. No, I said calmly. You threw everything away. His eyes darkened. She lied to me. I tilted my head. You knew what she was. You just thought you were the exception. I leaned forward slightly, lowering my voice. Tell me, Logan, how did it feel? Watching her use you the same way you thought she was using me. His face twitched, and for a moment, I thought he might take a swing at me. But he didn't. He just exhaled and looked down at his drink. Defeated. I stood up, tossing a few bills on the table. Next time, I said, buttoning my jacket, pick a better investment. Then I walked away, because he didn't matter anymore. None of them did. Madison reached out once. A single email sent from some throwaway account. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even an attempt to reconcile. It was just anger, pure and raw. You destroyed me. I didn't reply. I just sat there for a long moment, staring at the screen, letting the words sink in. And then I did something I never thought I'd do. I laughed, because she still didn't get it. I didn't destroy her. She did that all on her own. And I was finally free.